What is up, everybody? It's BionicTide here, coming at you with another Diablo IV build guide. This time we're going to talk about a class that we have never touched here on this channel, and that is the Sorcerer. Now, I know everybody and their mother is rocking the ball lightning build, but something you have to note is there's 1,000 different variations of the build, and we've tested all of them. And out of all of them, what we found was one build that can take on a tier 100 in a 4-man carry, then turn around and kill Uber Lilith in a 4-man carry, then turn around and kill Duriel in a 4-man carry, disintegrate world bosses. It can really do everything without ever having to swap any gear or aspects. And what if I told you that this one build to rule them all for the ball lightning sorcerer didn't use a single unique, much less uber unique? And that's not to say we don't have access to them. We have all of them. But we've tested everything, and I can assure you that the best build for sorcerer is actually one that doesn't need any of them. And this is good news, because if you're missing some, now you don't have to worry. You can kill Uber Duriel as many times as you want with this. You can even solo them, and you don't need them. You can do it with just aspects that you find in the game. Now we'll go over all of this, so let's jump right into it. I'm going to show you some gameplay while we do it, but really it's the smoothest thing that you'll ever play. I know I recently saw some of the tier lists where people were saying that Barbarian is the only build that can keep killing and moving without ever having to stop. Not true. This build walks through dungeons at all levels. Easily, in my opinion, the strongest build in the entire game for any class. And the way that we've designed it is actually nerf proof. Blizzard would have to completely delete the class and remake it from scratch in order to avoid us capitalizing on all this damage. Because we're built in a way that's not just utilizing ball lightning, but multiple other damage types. So even if they nerf one part of the build, we can just lean heavier into another without hardly changing our gear, if at all. And I'm going to show you how all of this works right now, so let's jump into it. First thing we'll look at is the skills, because this is really important on how we geared ourselves and why we're converting a lot of our damage into not lightning. And that is these skills right here. So for our enhancements, enchantments, we're actually running Firebolt enchantment to put burn damage on everything we do. We just went from a major lightning damage, lightning crit damage build to a damage over time build with just this one enchantment. Then we're going to put Frozen Orb enchantment on our other enchantment slot to give us not only ice effect and an opportunity to instantly freeze enemies when you combine it with our Frost Nova, but in fact 8 skills on our skill bar already, because we're going to be using these without ever having them on our hotbar. This allows us to have 6 other skills on there, and when you combine that with things like our lightning being able to throw out random skills, we can actually go up to a 10 skill build. And in this insane 10 skill build, we're utilizing all of the elements, so no specific element can get nerfed, and no type of enemy can resist us. Let's jump right into the gear here. Oops, wrong button. So starting off, we're going to get a regular helmet. All of these are going to be regular gear with aspects. We're not going to be using any uniques, even though we could be using all of them. And I'll show you why. You can still use these uniques for farming, by the way. I know the occult is one of my, the Oculus is one of my favorite weapons in the game for just low tier farming, because you get teleport after teleport after teleport after teleport, which is really fun, but it's not as effective as what we're going to be doing here. So for high tier content, we're going to be using armor resist as one of our main, total armor percent as one of our main stats on everything we do. And then somewhere in our gear, we're going to try to get at least 2 of our elements for our resists all the way up. What I'd like to do is get 3 of them on the boots. I know that's a tall order, but if we can get, say, at least 2 of them and maybe sacrifice teleport here, then we'd still be able to get mana cost reduction and movement speed, and we'd have 2 of our resists capped right there on the boots. And as you can see, I'm already capping 3 of them with only 1 on the boots. So if we could get 1 more on the boots, that'd be great. Shadow resist, we can honestly throw a shadow gem in here and all of our resists will be capped. So don't look at my gear in game, it's not exactly perfect. I'll have a Paragon and build planner on the Discord for you here that'll have exactly what you want to look for. But my gear works, it's good enough, and that's the beauty of this build. Unlike having, perfect rolls on all of these uber uniques, you don't need to be perfect, and you can shred all levels of content, and I mean shred. So going back into it, what we're taking here is Ever Living. This is just going to give us major damage reduction against any enemy that's CC'd, or more importantly, vulnerable. And in this build, we're going to be making everything vulnerable all the time. Cooldown reduction, really nice. Not 100% necessary, but really nice. I have 1 of my resists on here, a second 1 of my resists on here, and then total armor. Could get attack speed, but we really don't need it for this build. Honestly, I would like to, like I said, put 2 resists here and 2 resists on the boots, and then you can easily cap all your resists. Moving on, we're going to go with Snow Veiled for our body armor. Snow Veiled is just another nice quality of life improvement. Every time we use our ice armor, we gain Unstoppable. And when we gain Unstoppable, other good things happen as well. This one right here gives us Unstoppable as well. If you were to, say, throw on one of your Uber Uniques, you can do even more crazy things with Unstoppable. This one here, Tybalt's Will, grants you a massive damage bonus when you have Unstoppable. But again, you don't really need it. You're actually going to do just as much, if not more damage without it. And we'll explain all of that in a moment. But Unstoppable is something you can never get enough of. So we have multiple ways to go into it. This just keeps us unstoppable all the time. The other nice benefit of this aspect is it actually gives us even more armor. 30% increased armor for 4 seconds, or 5 seconds if you get a perfect roll on it. 30% increased armor is huge. That is like a might and then some, And because we don't have a basic skill that we're actively using, that's right, we don't need a generator. We have infinite mana. Because we don't have a basic skill that we're actively using, we're never going to really see the benefits of might anyway. So this is kind of our way of making up for might, plus we gain Unstoppable. Again, total armor, max life, as much damage reduction as you can. I have fire resist on here because I don't have a perfect roll of it here. You don't need it here. This is a bad piece of gear. Still looking for a better one. Lucky hit, critical strike chance, attack speed, and this one is the important one here. Chance to restore your primary essence. If you don't have as much mana cost reduction as I do, and I'll show you how you can get literally infinite mana and not even need this, but if you don't have perfect mana reduction, then you're going to want to throw this affix on as many pieces of gear as you can, and there's quite a few of them. And that's also why we got Lucky Hit. Lucky Hit does quite a few things for us in this build. Attack speed is generally good, but what I would like to see is that crit strike chance isn't really necessary for us. We are using the lucky hit a bunch. But we could do away from crit in this build, because I have a feeling they're going to nerf that even harder in the future. Really, honestly, I mean, you could probably lean into crit. We're doing it quite a lot in here. I think overpower is really what's going to get nerfed. But lucky hit is going to be really nice to proc all of those things. Like our lucky hit there, we also have some lucky hit other places in the build. So it's just really nice to proc. Crit strike, chance, attack speed, always good. But the main thing here is the gravitational aspect. Gravitational is a huge part of this build. As you know, the ball lightning build kind of depends on that. You can play without it, and it's kind of fun to just be a Gatling gun of giant orbs flying all over the map. It is effective, but not as effective. Not nearly as effective. So try to get a good gravitational aspect, as this is the main carry aspect of your build. Moving on real quickly here, just going to fly through some of it. We have Protector to generate us extra barriers. Our goal is to have as many barriers as we can. Between our ice armor giving us barriers, flame shield actually counts as barrier for this as well. And the Protector giving us random barriers too. Because we're going to take advantage of our barriers for extra damage while we have a barrier up. And we'll get to that one in a moment here as well. But it's just really nice to have extra defense, especially when you're going into tier 100s. Again, total armor, max life, always good things to have. On this one, we're actually running 4 ranks of ball lightning. And this is where we start kind of pooping on having all of the uniques and uber uniques, because we can do things like this that we can't do on those. So those 4 ranks of ball lightning are huge. They bring our ball lightning damage up considerably. So you see we're actually gaining from 18k all the way up to 22k with each of our lightnings before any of our other modifiers. So that's pretty huge. Dodge chance against close enemies is just something that I had on these pants. Ideally, you could probably get dodge chance overall, or just more damage reduction. I would like to really have seen damage reduction against distant enemies here. Would have been really helpful, since we already have damage reduction from close in some other places in the build. Close and distant always work really well together, so if you can get them both on every piece, that's a really, really good way to do it. I guess I actually swapped that out. Now I have regular damage reduction here. But getting close and distant is good, or you could get raw damage reduction on both. But moving on, movement speed, and then like I said before, try to get 2 different resists here. The ranks teleport are nice, but they're not necessary. Try to get 2 different resists on the boots. Any elements, whatever elements you don't have on the helmet, try to get them on the boots. And then movement speed is huge. Movement speed is always good. And mana cost reduction. Mana cost reduction is really important. You want that on your boots no matter what. For the weapon, we just try to focus on all of our damage buckets. I would have liked to have seen maybe vulnerable damage instead of burning, or something along those lines, but having burning damage, or damage to burning enemies. Remember, burning damage is not the same as damage to burning enemies. Same with poison damage is not the same as damage to poisoned enemies. Burning damage just is only the fire damage that we do. Damage to burning enemies is all the damage that we do after an enemy is set on fire. And if you remember back to our skills, we are setting all of our enemies on fire with everything we do. So really good. Could be better just because it could have a higher percentage if it were something else like vulnerable. But then we're going to put Stormwell on here. Stormwell just makes our damage numbers go through the roof. Any enemy that's vulnerable while we have a barrier, and remember we have barriers all the time, is going to take 30% more damage from us on every side. So just way more damage. Same thing here. While we have a barrier, enemies are going to take increased damage. I used to use the Frost Orb stays and explodes a few times. Also good, but you just can't argue with the massive damage boost that we're getting from all of these. Cooldown reduction, pretty nice here. Not really the most important. Resource generation, really nice here. You can also get restores resource on lucky hit, which would be ideal, and you can get mana cost reduction. Getting all three of those on one of these focus items is going to be your best in slot item, hands down. You really want to try to get mana cost reduction if you can. It can help you bring yourself to what I call a perfectly balanced cost and loss effectiveness, which I just made up as I was saying this. But moving on to the rings, we're going to get, and this is where it really balances out. If you can get a perfect roll on a prodigy aspect, it is hands down going to be the best aspect like in the game for any build. What it does is allow you to restore up to 25 mana every time you use a cooldown. That means if you can effectively get your mana cost reduction high enough, I have a little bit more on this ring, I believe, so I'll throw this on for now. But if you can get your mana cost reduction high enough, as you can see here, my mana cost is 29 on Ball Lightning. And my mana returned on this ring could go up to 25. So if I had mana cost reduction on my Dreamcatcher as well, I could effectively cast Ball Lightning for free. I would get my 25 mana back for every 25 mana I spent, which initially makes my Ball Lightning cost 0 mana to cast. This is going to be insane and not something you can do with Uber Uniques. Moving back on though, resource generation, maximum mana, best in slot. Because we are leaning into the crit, you don't have to, but because we are leaning into the crit, we're going to go with crit chance, obviously. Damage to chilled is fine because everything gets chilled from our Frost Nova and our Frost Orbs. Same thing here, crit damage, vulnerable damage, lightning damage, because obviously we're using lightning. I would have preferred to have more mana, but resource generation and maximum mana would be perfect here, best in slot. And then we get to another one that people do a little differently, and that is our Necklace of Disobedience here. The aspect is, obvious. We get more armor for using Disobedience on our amulet, and more armor is good armor. But the thing to look at here is the ranks of mastery skills. The ranks of mastery skills actually apply to our Ball Lightning. So we're at 9 out of 5 with the pants, and then we throw this on, and we actually go all the way up to 11 out of 5, which again just pumps that Ball Lightning damage through the roof. The other thing it does is allow you to throw other mastery skills on there if you were wanting to goof around with something like, say, instead of Unstable Currents. Definitely an option. We're going to be using Unstable Currents because, again, this is going to pump us all the way up to a 10 skill build. The only thing I would really change on here, I would probably get rid of shock damage and try to get movement speed, because I am a whore for movement speed. The more the better, especially with this build that never stops moving and killing. We're just a Tesla coil walking through a dungeon. Mana cost reduction, again, really important here. Total armor, always great. But I would like to see movement speed, would have been perfect. So that is the gear. We're going to jump into the skill tree and where we do things slightly different. Again, just run through it all there. We do have, again, all of these, and they're not bad. If you want to just go kill vampires in the vampire zone, or do lower tier, and when I say lower tier, I mean 50, 60, even maybe up to 70 or 80. go ahead and use the Oculus. Go ahead and throw some of these other items on. They'll work great. They'll be really fun for jumping around and being really teleport spammy all over the place. But when you get into like tier 90 to 100, make sure you're rocking this build here. It does not get better. And let's jump into the skills here, and I'll show you why that is. So in the skill tree, big things we're doing, we're putting a couple points in a firebolt. We don't need firebolt to pierce through enemies because we're not actually casting it. We're taking the enchantment damage from it. So we're going to pump the damage up a little bit higher by adding an extra point directly into the skill. Then we're going to move down. Potent warding. Again, just resistance. We want as much resistance as we can. This will fill in any of those gaps. So if all your resistances are, you know, maybe what, 68, I think is what they'll cap to, instead of 70. This will actually push your cap level itself higher and then fill in the gap for you. So you'll be like 80, which is huge when you're doing the nightmare dungeons. Frozen orb, we're going to take greater frozen orb because we want to make enemies vulnerable with this. Just as many different ways to make enemies vulnerable as possible. We could have it restore mana when hitting a frozen enemy, and if you're struggling to find all your mana cost items, this is not a terrible option either. Definitely viable, but usually we start with our frozen orb, so getting like the first, just powering up our Tesla coil is going to cast so many of these that this will work fine for us. But like I said, if you need the extra mana because you haven't found the mana cost reductions, definitely take Destructive. It doesn't hurt to do. 1 point into Devastation, even though mana is great, we want to save our points, so we don't really need that, but we need to get to Elemental Dominance, which is just our core and mastery skills doing way more damage when cast with more mana. And if you have perfect mana reduction, you'll always have way more mana. And we're going to get to another trick here, where if you don't have perfect mana reduction, you can also kind of trick the system and work around that in a moment here. But Elemental Attunement just gives our crit chances a chance to reset the cooldown of one of our defensive skills. Always nice, because we will be critting a lot with our current setup. Even if you don't have crit strike chance on your gear, and this is why I said you don't necessarily need it, there is a lot of it built into the class. With the Paragons and the class itself, we end up with quite a bit. With no crit chance on our gear, I think we're still sitting at like 30% chance, which is huge. Still get this even if you're not going the crit route. 1 point into Flame Shield, we just want it for the immune. Then we're going to take our Teleport. We only have 1 point in here, the rest is just coming from our gear. And we're going to go to Shimmering Teleport for the damage reduction. Really nice, especially in a pinch if you remember to save it. It's really nice. Ice Armor, we're taking Enhanced Ice Armor. We like to generate mana as much as we can, so we're going to take that. Again, if you're at a perfect mana level where you're not actually costing yourself anything, you don't really need this. You can save yourself a point there and maybe put more into Elemental Attunement, or even something down here. Make Coursing Currents or something like that. But we're taking it because I don't have quite perfect. I'm like a 2 mana away. Enhanced Frost Nova, and then Mystical Frost Nova. Again, just makes enemies vulnerable, and we want enemies vulnerable all the time. If you're having trouble with mana, you could go Shimmering, but we really want the vulnerable. The vulnerable is so much better than the extra little bit of mana, and you're never going to have a problem with mana after I tell you this next trick here either, which I guess I could just show you now. We're going to take Invigorating Conduit, and basically all the little sparkles that fall on the ground while we're fighting, as long as we're walking over those in, like, say we're circling the boss, we'll be walking over them automatically. They're going to keep refilling our mana every time we pick one up. So as long as you're doing that, which you'll probably do by accident, you'll be refilling your mana constantly anyways. And by a huge percent too. I mean, it's 12 mana every orb, and we'll just be spam picking them up as we walk. But just moving right through the skills here, I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit. Align the elements. Mana Shield is going to give us extra damage reduction every time we spend mana, and boy, will we spend it. Especially when you can spend it for free. Using a cooldown grants 30% of your maximum life as a barrier. Yet another way that we generate barriers. We really want to keep our barrier up all the time. And that'll stack into our other barriers, and then we'll get all that damage for having a barrier. Icy Veil just increases the length of our barriers. We want kind of the mending stone for Sorcerer. We want our barriers to stay up as long as possible. And here we don't actually have any points into those. If you follow the red lines, we're getting Devouring Blaze, which is a really, really, really nice skill. Because our skills are lighting everything on fire with every ability, we'll always be getting the Devouring Blaze buff, which is 21% increased critical strike damage against enemies. And if they're also immobilized, it goes all the way up to 30%. If you can't get ranks of Mastery on your amulet, get ranks of Devouring Blaze, and you'll be sitting pretty still. And then come down here, obviously we're getting Ball Lightning. We're maxing Ball Lightning out as hard as we possibly can. And then we're going to get the Wizard's Ball Lightning. If an enemy is hit by at least 4 of our Ball Lightnings, then they're generating Crackling Energy, which, again, is part of our Infinite Sustain. If you have perfect Mana Sustain already, then you really don't need that, and you can get Ball Lightning, okay? Which just adds more CC to our kit. But going back down the build here, Permafrost, we're going to get Horror Frost just so that we do extra damage to chilled enemies. We chill enemies because we constantly spam frozen orbs at them for free, and we have our Frost Nova. So, Unstable Currents, we're going to get the Unstable Currents increases with our attack speed, or increases our attack speed, rather, because we're going to have our Vampire skills adding into that as well. Coursing Currents, and Electrocution. We want Electrocution because, you know, enemies deal less damage. Why wouldn't we? And then we're going to come down here for Veer's Mastery. Close enemies take more damage from our shock skills and deal less damage to us. We're always going to be close because we have our lightning floating around us. Critical strikes increase these bonuses by 25% for 3 seconds. So huge, huge, huge synergy with all of this stuff. I wouldn't change any of it unless you're at a perfect mana level, in which case I would maybe swap 1 or 2 of these over away from the mana and onto the vulnerable. But I would do that anyways, because you're never going to have a problem with mana due to your Crackling Orbs. So I would keep everything exactly as it is. We have huge synergy in this build. We'll go to the Paragon here, and we'll have a written guide for all of this. This is still the exact same basic Paragon that we were running before. You can find it in the planner. But we're going to be starting off with Control. Then we're going to be moving on to the Elemental Summoner. And we're not actually getting Elemental Summoner. We don't need it. But we do want the slot for the Adept. Huge skill damage bonus there. I don't have my glyphs maxed. Only 1 glyph. So you'll have a lot more damage when you get these all maxed. But then we're going to go into the Burning Instinct with Destruction. Huge crit strike damage. And like I said, even if you're not running crit strike chance on your gear, you're still getting a lot of it in the build regardless. So definitely pick that up. Then we're actually going to skip, and we're going to go up this way here. And we're going to get Exploit in here off of the Static Surge tree. And again, just huge damage. We want both benefits. But mostly we want to come over this way right away so that we can get Combustion going and get our Territorial. Territorial is going to knock out a lot of close damage with 15% damage reduction against close enemies, and we're always close. And then, of course, it's going to give us a lot of damage. Then we're going to come back up here, and we're finally going to get all of these. I think I actually went up to here first, and then we went and finished it out over here. So start here, go over, go up, then go up and over. Yeah. We are picking up the legendary here on Static Surge. Getting the final glyph socket in over here, we're going to get reinforced, which again, just vulnerable damage, and then we take less damage while we have a barrier, and that helps us sustain our barrier as much as we can. I'm not going to spend too much time on these. I will have the exact order and all of the points to min-max in the planner, which will be in the Discord. But that is pretty much everything. There are some general playstyle tips that you're going to want to kind of follow as guidelines. Basically, anytime you're in a dungeon, play off of your armor, strengths, and weaknesses. If all you could find was close armor rolls, then, you know, take out most of the melee guys first. If all you can find is distant melee rolls, you know, figure out what you need to do. If you have no damage reduction against distant enemies, take out all the rangers first. That way you're eliminating the biggest threat. But really, and I don't know why this isn't a common knowledge thing, but you should go after the ranged attackers first all the time anyways, because all of the melee ones are going to come to you and burn up in your coils. So the ranged guys will not come to you. They'll just be getting free damage on you while you fight the melee ones. So run after the ranged fighters right away when you're in the tier 100s. Knock them out, and all the melee ones will come to you anyways. And that's pretty much it. Try to avoid death effects, and a really easy way to do that is just to hold left click while you're attacking. As you can see, I have some of my skills bound off of my left click. If you still have your left click working for you, great, use it. But if you don't, make sure you still hold left click so that the whole time you're attacking, you're also moving forward. And that'll help you avoid a lot of the death effects. Death effects are strong this season because they play off of your resists. That's pretty much it, guys. You'll find a lot of the dungeons like Suppressor to be annoying because Suppressor eats all of your lightning balls. But if you teleport in to the Suppressor guy's bubble and then start generating your stuff inside there, it's a great way to clear the room from that. I would always start at that guy, just like a ranged target. Start inside of his bubble first, then clear everything in the room outwards from there. Just have fun, guys. It absolutely shreds. We'll show some gameplay. Let's get into that. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys hanging out. Be sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Comment too if you want to. Until next time, take it easy. You still here, huh? You lost? Oh, I know. You're looking for the website because you wanted some artwork. It's right up at the very top of the page there. No, that wasn't it. Maybe you're looking for the Twitch website. Okay, it's going to be over on the right. The video might have popped up by now, so you might have to rewind. That wasn't it either. Listen, I'm not really sure how to help you. Why don't you join the Discord, rewind the video, and you'll see it right behind the pop-up.